I'm Becca.
I'm Roshane.
I'm Eve.
I'm Paige.
And our book was The War of the Worlds, and it was written by H.G. Wells, and it came out in 1898.
The plot, basically, is that it's set in Britain, and Martians come down in a pod, and they start to slowly come out of the pods, and they start to attack Britain, and everyone's just freaking out, honestly. And basically, they do some attacking, they do some destruction, and eventually, one day, they're dead! Because of the bacteria in the atmosphere of Earth that affected them that the aliens weren't used to, and they died, and the Martians were gone, and everyone went back to normal. They just had trauma.
Yeah, and especially the main character. The main character is actually unnamed, and also basically like all the main characters, like the wife, his wife, and then the main character, who we know is a guy, they're unnamed. And basically, like, at the end, he talks about how he still, like, remembers those days. He's still, like, very affected by the trauma of it. And throughout those days, he also, like, experienced, like, even just, not just him, but, like, all of the citizens of, like, the certain towns in the majority area was London. They were all, like, extremely curious about these aliens.
So, a big thing in this book is about curiosity with, I guess you could say humans.
Yeah.
With the humans, and how it's human nature to go towards something that you don't know anything about, and in the end, they kind of died. Oops.
Mm-hmm. And in the beginning of the story, when one of the pods came down, I remember, like, they started to crowd around it. Like, at first,
yeah.
like, other people...
They pushed someone in
Yeah, they pushed someone into the pod.
Also the part where he was like, when everyone was getting blasted at first by that little heat ray thing, he was like so... I don't know.
Even with all the like death and destruction around,
he was so curious about what he was like.
Yeah,
I
think even though they knew that they could have just died like that, and they saw everyone just get burnt to a crisp by this invisible thing, people still kept like coming by the tree lines and watching what was going to happen.
Like, oh, that's a good idea.
Like, I have this quote from page 32. It says, "I did not dare to go back towards the pit, but I felt a passionate longing to peer into it." And this basically alludes to all the curiosity that they held about, like, the aliens in general, but it also holds meaning to curiosity that all humans seek in their life. They always are going to be curious about certain topics, certain things, basically anything that's new to them. They're going to want to figure it out, see what makes it tick, basically, like the psychology of it.
We always want to go to find something new and figure out how something works, no matter how, like, weird or grotesque it may be. And a quote from the book describes the aliens as a big grayish rounded bulk the size perhaps of a bear was rising slowly and painfully out of the cylinder as it bulged up and caught the light, glistening like wet leather. And that's just kind of gross once you read that. And that's what the people saw. The people literally saw this in the pit, and they were still like, you know what, I'm going to look at this, because I want to see what it is. So no matter how gross like something may be, human nature is just to look.
And even beyond how gross it was, like, everyone was dying. They had, like, the friggin' death ray going, and everyone was being killed, and everyone was still, like, standing in the trees and be like, ooh, I want to see what's in the pit. What's happening? What are we doing here?
Like, they still wanted to see everything, even though they knew some of the harm that it caused. That was only a glimpse as to how much harm.
Curiosity killed the cat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also the part where they were in that house and they were looking through the peephole, and if they were fighting, they were like fighting with each other. Even if they were being too loud, they would have literally burned to death. So that's another example of the curiosity.
And also another thing that I thought we could talk about this is the similar like kind of
overarching
book. Yeah, it relates to such as books that we're reading in class right now, Fahrenheit 451, and the book 1984 by George Orwell. It basically predicts those kind of things. So, like, it predicts certain, like, technological advancements. Like, in this, also, I saw that the pods, they didn't, like, have rockets back then. So, I mean, like, he sort of, like, depicted, like, those metal pods that could also be depicted as rockets now, or, like, the early beginnings of making those rockets. And while I was reading, I found similarities between this, like, certain events that happened, and Macbeth. Especially one about security is mortal's chiefest enemy. If anyone else wants to elaborate, because I feel like I've just been talking for a while.
So the security, that is part of the story when the narrator goes home. He goes to his wife and he tells her what's happening, and he can obviously tell that she's like scared of what's happening because he's like really close to their house that the aliens are. So he hugs her and he tells her that it's okay, it's gonna be okay, the military can take care of it, and we're gonna be okay. No need to worry about it. We're gonna destroy them easily. So he's making sure his wife isn't scared and putting her in that false sense of security.
And absolutely everyone was entirely confident in the military's ability and, like, in just humanity's overall higher intelligence. And they're so used to being the most intelligent life form on the entire planet that it didn't even cross their minds that the Martians could be further technologically advanced. But it just couldn't even cross their minds that the Martians were smarter.
The fact that they didn't even care in the beginning about, like, what they could do. Like, most people just did not care.
Like, they just went home. They're just like,
like, this is
that's
normal.
odd.
This is normal.
It fell from the sky.
They're like,
We won't
"Oh,
die."
It's an accident. It's an accident. They didn't.
Which I don't think that would actually happen in real life, because it wasn't even, like, publicly broadcasted all over the world.
Literally, one of the guys wrote to London about it, and they didn't print it in the paper.
Yeah, they
because
just
they're like,
didn't
it's not
care.
a big deal.
I don't, even though, like, we have more advanced technology where we can spread information more now, I don't think that would happen. That nobody would care. I think it would be a big, probably would be, people would think it was fake.
This just relates about mankind and about how giving people a false sense of security can actually lead to their own demise, and also sometimes, like Becca said, curiosity kills the cat, just like that thing. Sometimes curiosity inherently itself isn't a bad thing, but having too much of a certain trait, not just curiosity, but having too much of a certain trait can sometimes not lead to the best things.
Curiosity can bring us over the edge of what's safe to explore and what isn't.
Even after people died, like, it talked, like, the amount of detail it went in about certain things, it was really gross. But they talked about, like, the burnt bodies, and they were still going back to see the pods and stuff.
I just wanted to shed light on one more topic about how a lot of the stuff about, like, the colonization of, like, aliens onto Earth reminded me of just, like, even before, because I researched this, but it reminded me of just like, oh, colonization of America, you know, just like, it just kind of hinted at that to me. And I researched, and apparently what part of the thing that inspired H.G. Wells to write this book was that he was having a conversation with somebody about the British colonization of indigenous Tasmanians, and he was thinking, oh, well, what if this happened to people in Britain, people in London, but instead of some sort of, like, power outside of Earth, on a different planet.
Exactly, and I want to build off that. That actually relates to our salient passage that we chose. We must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species has wrought, not only upon animals such as vanished bison and the dodo, but upon its own inferior races. The Tasmanians were entirely swept out of existence in a war of extermination waged by European immigrants in the space of 50 years. Are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred in the same spirit? Which I think is really important because it brings back in, like, humanity's weakness that we think that we're better than everything and we can just do whatever we want.
Humans are so enveloped in their own self-worth and the own fact that they want to be better and they want to keep getting better than other species that they don't realize how much it may hurt them in the long run.
Also, I think touching up on what you said with the thing about how we think we're better than everyone else, at one point he was like comparing himself to, like, a rabbit or whatever. So it's basically like a slap in the face. Like, we think that we're all better than everyone else and we can do so many awful things to other people and other things, but the second it happens to us, we start to realize, like, how awful, I don't know if that's how I'm trying to word it is, it is. So once it happened to us, the narrator explained how he felt like a rabbit when he came out of that little house he was in with the
Curate,
that.
Just read it.
So yeah, he was talking about how he felt like a rabbit coming out of its hole, and when us humans do stuff around them, that's how they must feel. So it was kind of like a slap in the face, like, come on, eek. Should we do that?
And to connect with that, I sort of, to take the opposite stance, like, could one sympathize with the Martians? Like, they clearly, their planet was dying. They had a reason to come over to this one. And, like, our planet was great. And to them, we were such lesser life forms that it was the same as humans, like, plowing down forests to create housing for people and destroying those habitats for the animals. The Martians were doing the same thing. So, like, it comes to a point where the characters, I mean, of course they can be mad because it's their lives that are being taken, but they've done the same thing countless times, so the Martians are sort of, like, it's kind of a gray area.
It's basically just like for me, it's just like, it just seems like a lot of hypocrisy within, like, man's own self and his own mind and his own, like, morals. Like, you think it's okay to do this to others, but then once it happens to you, how would you feel? It's basically like, it's gonna sound cheesy, but like, treat others the way you want to be treated, which I know is it's very vague, but when you narrow it down to stuff like in this book about like the aliens colonizing for a future for themselves and for because they ran out of resources on Mars and they saw a perfectly fine Earth with just like, oh, one problem, humans. All right, let's wipe them out.
The whole book is basically, like, it feels like it was written basically to tell people, look at what you're doing, and it's like the author was like trying to tell us what we were doing without blatantly saying, this is what humans are doing to other species.
Now, this was an example that actually relates to this. It wasn't about this book, but it's basically like, we look at like ants, and I know it's a very insignificant little thing, but like we look at ants as like insignificant things, and they're like, oh, they don't have feelings, da 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 da. But that's the same way that the Martians were probably looking at the humans in this book, like, oh, they're nothing. You can kill them. It's fine. The same thing with the animals destroying things, and back then with the Native Americans and all that. That was just something.
I feel like, to round this out, the two things that I've learned about humanity today are, one, we are overconfident, and two, we are extremely hypocritical.
Oh, yes. That's
a very curious species when it comes to new things, and we'll explore new things no matter the cost that it, like, we may take or that may take from us.
And alright, so I think that's it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And this is our book talk.
Woo, bye!